morning, everybody. Happy Easter. I'm sad that we can't be together this morning, but we'll do the best that we can. I'm going to be telling the Easter story using some props. We've done this in the past. If you were in Sunday school on Easter before, you may have been one of the kids to get an egg, and everybody would have a plastic egg, and when it came to your part in the story, you would open up the egg and show everybody what was in it. So I'll be doing that part today. Our story starts out in Jerusalem. Jesus is getting ready to ride into town, but he needs something to ride on. So he sends his disciples on ahead and says they will find a donkey and a colt tied up, to untie them and bring them to him. And he said, if anybody says anything to you, you just say that the Lord has need of them. So they went and they got the colt and the donkey, and Jesus did ride the donkey in. And people put down their coats, and that's what the donkey and the colt stepped on. So when we open up the blue egg, we have a little donkey. There was one of the disciples, and he was not a very good man. He decided to betray Jesus. There were people looking for Jesus, the chief priests, and he said, well, what will you give me if I turn Jesus over to you, if I tell you where he's at? And they said that they would give him money. So he did betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And we have 3 coins here that represent the 30 pieces of silver. And once they got into town, Jesus had a special dinner with his disciples in the upper room. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he said to them, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. So in the light purple egg, we look inside, and this is a cup, miniature cup, representing the cup that the disciples and Jesus drank from. It was a very special dinner that night. After they finished, they went to a place called the Garden of Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. He took Peter and James and John with him, and he was very troubled. He knew what lay ahead for him. And he said to them, my soul is very, very sorrowful. Remain here and watch. And they were to pray. And we have inside the orange egg the praying hands, representing what they were doing at the Garden of Gethsemane. When Jesus finished praying, the men who wanted to kill him took him as a prisoner, and they took him to Pilate, who was the ruler, and he had Jesus whipped. The whip was long and hard, and it hurt Jesus very much, and he bled. And when we open up the green egg, inside we have the whip. Now, Peter was a very special disciple, but even he denied knowing Jesus. When all this was going on, he became very afraid, and the soldiers were out looking for people that were followers of Jesus, and he was afraid, and he denied knowing Jesus. And then he remembered something that Jesus had told to him. He said, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down and cried because Jesus was right, and he had denied him, and he was very, very sorrowful. But then, so when we open up the yellow egg, here's the rooster. Remember, the rooster crowed to remind Peter that Jesus told him that you will deny me. So the soldiers of the governor took Jesus to the headquarters. They stripped him of his clothes. They put a robe on him. They made a crown of thorns, and this was very painful. You know what thorns feel like. If you ever touch a rose, it's got thorns on the stem. Now they made a crown made out of thorns, and they stuck it on Jesus's head, and they shoved it in, and I'm sure that it hurt very, very much, and I'm sure it made him bleed. They put a reed in his hand, and then they stood back and they mocked him. They made fun of him. They said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" So when we open up our light orange egg, this is representing the crown of thorns that they shoved on Jesus's head. They took him, and they went out. Jesus had to carry his cross on his back quite a ways to a place called the place of a skull, which is called Golgotha. They crucified him, which means they hung him on the cross, and they used nails to nail his hands into the cross. And there were 2 people on each side of him that were convicted. They were accused of being thieves, robbers. They were on each side of Jesus, and they hung all 3 men up, and they used the nails. So when we look inside the light green egg, this represents the nails that they used to nail Jesus to the cross. Now they had to make sure that these men died, so the soldiers, they were going to break all their legs, the legs of the men. They broke the legs of the 2 thieves first. They went to Jesus, but he was already dead. They did not break his legs, but just to make sure, one of the soldiers took a spear and they drove it into Jesus's side, and when they did, blood and water gushed out. That was what they were doing to make sure that Jesus was dead. And when we open up the purple egg, we see the spear inside. Now remember, Jesus was an innocent man. Now the evening time came, and there was a man that was pretty wealthy, and he was a follower of Jesus. He went to Pilate and he said, "Can I have the body of Jesus?" And Pilate said yes. And so Joseph took the body, he wrapped it in a clean cloth, and he took the body to his own tomb. He had made a tomb out of rock. It was kind of what we would think of as a cave, but this is how they buried people back then. And this was a tomb that he had for himself, but he gave it to Jesus for him to be laid in there. So they took his body and they put him in the tomb. And when we open up the light blue egg, this represents the cloth, the shroud that they wrapped Jesus in. And next, the Bible tells us that, behold, there was a great earthquake. An angel of the Lord came down from heaven and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like white lightning, and his clothes as white as snow. The guards were afraid, and they trembled with fear, and they just passed out. They became like dead men. So when we look inside the pink egg, there's a nice big stone. Of course, the boulder was much, much bigger. That was blocking the entrance to the tomb. But this represents that boulder or that rock. Now some women came to the tomb and they were looking for Jesus, and the angel was still there, and he said, "Don't be afraid. I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. Come see the place where he lay." So we get to our last egg, and this is the most important one. We open it up. Nothing is there. This represents the tomb. The tomb is empty. Jesus has risen. He's no longer in the grave. And that's the end of our story. Of course, the story really doesn't end. All of us can have Jesus in our hearts, and I'm so thankful for our church, thankful for our church family. Most of all, I'm thankful for what Jesus has done for me, done for my family. We have a reason to be joyful today, even though we can't be together. It's a wonderful day. It's a glorious day, and I hope everybody has a blessed and wonderful Easter. Thank you.